On Christmas night, 1996, a little 6-year-old girl was killed in her own home. And it kicked off one of the most tragic and just plain baffling cold cases in American history. For decades now, the whole investigation has been completely stuck, right? Pulled between two key pieces of evidence that tell completely different stories. So in this explainer, we're going to break down that central conflict, the one that's kept the JonBenét Ramsey case unsolved for so long.
You can just feel the weight in those words, can't you? That's from her father, John Ramsey, nearly 30 years after she died. It just captures how heavy this mystery still is. For the family, for everyone who's followed this case, the need for answers is just as real today as it was then. So, to really get why those answers have been so hard to find, we have to go back, all the way back to the beginning.
All right, so let's set the scene. We're going back to that morning, which was just beyond chaotic and absolutely heartbreaking. So it's just before 6 a.m. on the day after Christmas. Patsy Ramsey makes a frantic 911 call. She says her daughter has been kidnapped and there's a ransom note. Police get there in minutes, but here's the thing that's just mind-boggling. For 7 hours, everyone thinks this is a kidnapping. It's not until about 1 p.m. that John Ramsey himself finds his daughter's body in a small room in their basement. The crime scene was a mess by then. The case got off to a really, really rough start.
And right from the get-go, investigators were staring at a huge problem. It's like the case immediately split into two different paths that went in opposite directions. On one side, you have the ransom note, and on the other, the DNA. And they tell completely different stories.
Okay, so let's start with clue number 1, this ransom note they found on the stairs. And honestly, this thing is one of the weirdest artifacts in the history of true crime.
The first thing that just jumps out at you is the money. $118,000. I mean, who asks for that? Not $1 million, not even $100,000. It's this very, very specific number. Super weird for a kidnapper, right?
And then, boom, you find out why. That amount, it was the exact size of a work bonus John Ramsey had just gotten. I mean, come on, that's not a coincidence. That tells you whoever wrote this note knew the family's finances intimately. And believe me, the weirdness was just getting started. The note itself is, well, it's a mess, personality-wise. It's like the writer couldn't decide who they were supposed to be. One minute, they're this small, foreign faction, super formal and official sounding. The next, there's some angry business rival calling John a fat cat. And then, out of nowhere, you get this line about using your good, Southern common sense. It's like 3 different people wrote this thing.
And get this line, make sure you bring an adequate size attaché to the bank. Attaché? Who talks like that in a ransom note? It's just so theatrical. The whole note reads less like a real threat from a criminal and more like someone trying to play the part of a kidnapper they saw in a movie. That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Well, think about it. The note is super long, nearly 3 pages. It was written on a notepad from inside the house with a pen from inside the house. Real ransom notes are short. They're to the point. This felt different. This felt staged. It led a lot of investigators to believe it was all a misdirection, written by someone in the family to cover something up.
So, everything about the note is screaming inside job, right? It points the finger right at the family. But then you look at the physical evidence, the forensics found on JonBenét's body, and that tells a totally different story. Okay, so now let's talk about the DNA, because this is where the whole case gets turned completely on its head. So, here's the bombshell. On 2 separate pieces of JonBenét's clothing, the lab found traces of DNA, and it didn't belong to anyone in the family. It belonged to an unknown male, a mystery man. And just like that, the whole intruder theory is back on the table, and it's stronger than ever.
But there was a catch, and it's a big one. The DNA wasn't a clean sample from just the intruder. It was a perfect 50-50 mixture. Imagine 2 sets of DNA tangled up together, 50% JonBenét's and 50% this unknown guy's. That makes it incredibly tough for scientists to pull them apart and get a clear picture of just the suspect.
And that's the frustrating part. We have this critical clue, but it's like it's locked in a safe, and we don't have the right key yet. The technology we use for genetic genealogy, where they trace a suspect's family tree through public databases, it just can't handle a sample that's this mixed up. So the DNA is there, but we can't fully use it.
So you see the problem, right? You've got these two huge pieces of evidence, and they're basically at war with each other. And that war has kept this case in a stalemate for decades. Let's just lay it all out. The ransom note points in. It feels staged, personal, like it had to be someone who knew them. But the DNA? It points out. It points to some unknown man, an intruder. You see the dilemma? How can both be true? This is the paradox at the very heart of the case.
So, after all this time, where do we go from here? Is there any chance we'll finally get some answers? Well, maybe.
And there actually is a recent development, a real glimmer of hope. John Ramsey has confirmed that the Boulder police have finally sent evidence from the case for new, advanced testing. I mean, for a case that's been frozen in time for years, this is a huge deal. So what's the goal here? Well, the big hope is that technology has finally caught up. They're hoping these new techniques can finally crack that 50-50 DNA sample, pull out a clean profile of the unknown man, and then run it through those public genealogy databases. If they can find a match, even to a distant cousin, they could build a family tree and track him down.
So, in the end, it all comes back to that same conflict. The note versus the DNA. The behavioral evidence versus the biological evidence. It's been almost 30 years, and we're still stuck between those two poles. The big question, the one everyone is asking, is whether our technology is finally smart enough to see through the confusion and finally give this family, and all of us, the truth about what happened that Christmas night.